Hello folks, so got another update on the 4coder virtual indent virtual whitespace situation. As I said last time, the next step is sort of driving all of the things I've built so far through one system that allows me to sort of specify these indents for both wrapped and unwrapped lines in a way that sort of mirrors the way you do indentation by inserting spaces, where I just specify here's how far over I want this line to be in a sort of array that where each line gets a certain indentation value, right? And then that is used to drive the rendering lineup, the cursor, and so on. And turns out that the first sort of iteration of that concept is ready to demo right now. So it's not really visible here because the thing I've been doing up until now had the same effect as this, but this is all driving through one single data structure now. But where it does become visible is if I start wrapping lines, because up until now I didn't have any way of telling the disparate systems of rendering and cursor positioning and metadata measurements. All of those different systems didn't have any way of knowing, oh, this wrapped line should have this much indent, unless it just looked at the same rule, right? So I basically made a very simple rule so that they all had some very small piece of code that they shared in common, but I don't want to have 3 or 4 or 5 repetitions of the indent rule scattered all throughout the code. I don't even want calls like that, because if I have calls spread out everywhere in a system like that where I eventually want to customize it, that's going to start seeming kind of callback-ish, right? I don't want to have a different instance of this function being called everywhere to determine how much to indent this line, how much to indent this wrapped version of the line. So that's why we needed the data structure. Well, since I was doing that, I kept the system very simple, and I didn't allow wrapped lines to have different indents than their parent line, basically. If a line started at a certain indent and then it wrapped to the exact same position. But now that I have that data structure, things are a little different. So let me go ahead and enable wrapping, and let me shrink down the column size a little bit so we can see this. You can see now that the stair stepping is basically perfect. Like right here, it doesn't look perfect, but that's because there's a space character there. And I've been wondering about, this is a separate issue, but I'm wondering about whether or not after a wrap, all the space characters that start the next line should probably be swallowed up by the virtual whitespace system. That just is a fancier detail that I haven't taken care of yet. But in general, you can see that now, if like this N here wraps from this O up here, and I can navigate around there, I can click on it if I want. All the systems basically agree on where that N is supposed to be, which is good. And the reason they agree is because it's all running through that data structure that I generate. And the rule for the data structure now is not to make all the code match up everywhere. Now there's one spot where I measure what the indents should be, and everyone else just reads out of that array, and so the code is similar everywhere, but now it doesn't, the exact rules about how things get indented are based on how you set that data structure. They're not about inserting the correct code in all of those different locations. The code can stay the same, and the customizations can happen in a different location in the code altogether. So that's kind of the advancement for today. Things that need to happen to start putting this whole thing together into the actual useful version of this now are, for one thing, this is still wrapping on a per character basis. So for instance, if we look at this locations word again, it didn't wrap the word locations, it put the N down here. So one thing that isn't specified yet is how do we decide when to wrap, right? We just wrap when the next character we're about to put on the screen goes past the max. Well, what we actually want to do is have a little more flexibility, so we can say, oh, we should start wrapping now. And now that all these systems exist, all these different systems not only allow the indentation system to work, but they're going to allow arbitrary wrap positions in the lines to work as well. So one thing that needs to happen now is I got to figure out how I want to sort of specify that. Is it going to be something that's hard-coded in, like, oh, it just wraps based on, something that looks like identifiers? Does it wrap based on a customized rule, and how do I allow that to be customized? That sort of part of the problem is something I'm going to start exploring next. Maybe not in the next part, but at some point in the future. The other thing that I have to do is, now that I have the data structure that specifies how much to do virtual indentation at each point, I need to start coming up with the actual rules for what should be in that data structure. Right now I'm doing a stair stepping where I go 0, 1, 2, 3, and it's not actually 0, 1, 2, 3, it's multiplied by the character width, so you can indent by pixel. But what needs to happen next is uh, in that region of the system is how do I decide how much indentation to do at each line. Now I think the reason I mentioned the other one first, the wrapping by words instead of by characters, should come first because how can I decide how to wrap this line here where the T starts when really the N should be there, right? The code for how to do the indentation rules doesn't make sense if I don't even have the wrapping rules lined up correctly yet, because how will I even know what the lines are supposed to start with correctly? And I'll be developing it with sort of the wrong first test cases, I guess. So those are the next two big problems I got to deal with. Tomorrow is Wednesday, which means I'll be streaming. So if you join me tomorrow, you can see me working on this problem. I'll probably be working on how to wrap whole words or tokens, or maybe how to even make code smart decisions on where to do the wrapping. So all that coming up in tomorrow's stream. Thanks for following along, and see you guys later. Bye bye.